think that everyone seems to share a similar background in music, and certainly West Virginia and the Appalachian region's issues and environment comes out in your music. How did you two come to discover those similar musical interests, and how did you figure out that the others shared in that? I know you were talking about collaborating and whatnot, but when it comes to songwriting, you guys have some Appalachian issues that emerge in your music, and that seems to come from a couple different places. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So Blake looked at me, so I'm assuming he wants me to take point on that one. And I will speak to that one. I'm a little passionate about it. I grew up in, obviously growing up in West Virginia, everybody in 8th grade, at least and as far as I'm familiar, they still teach it. West Virginia history class is a requirement. And I remember back then falling asleep quite often in the class, but the section that I was awake for was a part that I think really got me invested and turned me into the kind of history buff that I am now, because we were learning about the 1921 coal mine wars. And I thought, well, that actually sounds pretty interesting, and not just like this law was passed then. And, it was something dynamic and something interesting and something that had lasting impact that happened right here in the state. And the significance of it was not lost on me then. For whatever reason, my dumb 8th grade brain absorbed just that in that class and was primed and ready to receive it. And I also had, the experience of growing up in a town that was also pretty dependent on the industry there. And it's an aluminum plant. Ravenswood is still an aluminum town. And if the aluminum plant were to be gone tomorrow, so would Ravenswood. And I'd say a good portion of that county, honestly. And, they're working on that. There's some other places coming in and things like that. But to be honest, even with those places coming in, I'm not sure if Ravenswood would have the legs to stand on were it not for the industry. And you can see in other spots in West Virginia where the industry did leave and where the industry was coal. Those things were gone. And now so are those towns. Those towns are basically nothing. And, the people that are there, God bless them. There's that some of these people don't have serviceable roads or even internet access. And things that we think are just like basic privileges. And you don't realize how much of the daily world has kind of become dependent on these things. These people don't have the internet to order a pizza to their place if their road is frozen over, or to call their electric company if their power is out. And let alone if they'll even send someone out there on that road for days, because it's probably bottom priority for the 15 people that live out in that holler. And so West Virginia is really no stranger to industry just kind of taking what it wants and then leaving whatever, in its wake. And that aluminum town that I grew up in still has a long history of having a strong union and strong workers' rights that it actually has helped establish in the state. And my dad was part of the union growing up and a proud union member. And he also worked at that plant, still works at that plant. And I worked at that plant for a couple of years, actually, before the band started, in some of the same departments that my same family members have worked in, and some of the same places that people have died in that factory. And not too long ago, just within a couple decades, which seems insane. But it's not uncommon just in America itself. But, it was, now looking back, it's no wonder why it caught my interest. And it was during the pandemic, and I was just kind of frustrated and I needed something to be frustrated about. And I just kind of found myself going back over, and it was on the anniversary of it, I think in 2021, or not 2021, it would have been 2020. I started writing and reading more about it just because I got this passion reignited for it. And I only had about half a song written, and it was just that first verse that is still in the song now, and a chorus, I think. And whenever we had formed the band, we were coming up on another anniversary, because it would have been a year or two later. And Blake, I played just a little bit for him, and I didn't expect it to fit the vibe of the folk space that we were going for, the softer, more acoustic folk that we were going for. And everybody in the band was really excited about it. And Blake wrote some great verses on it. And that kind of helped inspire me to write then that final piece the little mini verse there at the end.
Nice.
And that's kind of how the song came together. And if you've been to a show recently, you know I get real carried away with the speech at the beginning, kind of giving like a brief history. They tell me I'm yapping all the time, but yeah, that's sort of it. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but
no,
it definitely bleeds into the art.
That's exactly what I wanted, and I would tell you that that's 100% folk. I mean, that's what folk music is. A lot of folk music is the ballad of the working man and the ballad of the underprivileged, and so it absolutely fits perfectly in your band. And you can treat it musically however you want, but that's dialed in. And that song, I remember when you played 1921 at the Burl back in February, that song stood out for me. It's like, oh wow, like prior to that song playing, you guys were a band that sounded good. And then you played that song, and I was like, and they stand for something. There's some substance here. And that's what made me really interested in figuring out more about you guys and following you along. So I applaud you for that song because it opened a bigger door for me in getting to know your all's music. So let's take a step or two back here and throw it over. Blake, tell me where music started for you. I get that when you guys came together, you were in worship band at Marshall University or whatever. And so I understand there's obviously church has an impact and a lot to do with it. But what's your earliest memories of music being something you wanted to do?
Man, so music has been, it's a big thing for my family. My dad's I think it was my dad's grandpa. He would go around to churches in rural West Virginia and teach them how to read sheet music, and he ran a music school. And so it's been a thing that's been passed down through a lot of the generations of my family, and that same for me. We would go to church every Sunday, and we'd sing, of course, at the beginning of service and at the end of service. And then at the school I went to, I was in choir from kindergarten through senior year. So it's always been something I've done. I think the first time I ever looked at music and had an idea that I wanted to do this is my family also religiously watched American Idol when I was growing up. And so I'd see people go on there and they'd get their ticket to go to Hollywood and sing. And so that was always like, oh, that's so cool. And that'd be fun to do. And then it kind of just went away as I got into middle school and high school. And I was like, well, obviously that's not realistic. And I also didn't think that I just had the skill set for it. And it was just kind of something fun to do. And then got into college and started, what I just talked about, hanging out with Brett and Noah, and realized, oh, this is something we could do. But it's always had a big part in my life. Tried several times to learn instruments for one reason or another, just didn't happen. So we're here now, and I sing. That's where we're at.
I'm right there with you, except I can't sing. So that's why I talk. That's all I know how to do. So
it's working for you.
Noah, what about you? Where did music start for you?
Yeah, I really credited the first memories that I have. There's a radio station in, I'm sure it hits a lot more than Jackson County, but it comes in real clear in Jackson County. And it's Big Buck Country 101.5.
There you go.
And they play still to this day some of the best country music you've ever heard. And they play, Waylon Jennings, Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, the Oak Ridge Boys. And so I remember hearing a lot of this music growing up, and dudes that were just like guys that look like my dad's friends. You know what I mean? God bless Johnny Paycheck, but he looks like someone chewed him up and spit him out. You know what I mean? So whenever I heard, Don't Take Her, She's All I've Got, I was like, and then I saw that dude on the front of it. I was like, well, shoot, that's just the guy down at the Exxon. You know what I mean? And so, I grew up and to help with that, my family all were a lot of bluegrass pickers and players. And I grew up with a famous mandolin player. I didn't grow up with him, but I grew up with him as my delivery driver, Johnny Stats.
Okay.
And he would, no joke, show up and deliver a package and then pick you a tune on some instrument that he would have made that night. You should look him up if you get the chance. Johnny Stats, great mandolin player.
All right. I'm going to write it down. We'll link to him in the show notes. Here we go.
Awesome. Yeah. Johnny Stats. He's just got done playing some shows all over the place. People have had him open up. You'll find no shortage of good music from him. Excellent. And so there were these people all around Jackson County that just looked like the same regular dudes that I listened to on the radio. They were also really good pickers. You know what I mean? So I was like, well, shoot, there's really not a difference. It's just they're on the radio and these guys are in Meemaw's backyard. Yep. And aside from that, my dad also listened to a lot of classic rock. Nice. And so I think that's where it kind of bleeds in a little bit. And so, yeah, it was a lot of family members and then just a lot of like random dudes that were around Jackson County who were just really, really great pickers. And I had enough exposure to see people that way. And I guess enough of them were cool enough guys to where I wanted to be like them and pick up a guitar. So, yeah, I would credit just enough positive influences.